Sadie Callahan asked me to be her fake boyfriend for her cousin's wedding on a Tuesday, over cold pad thai, like she was asking me to water her plants. Then, 3 days later, standing in the gravel driveway of her family's lake house with our bags in our hands, she leaned in close enough that I could smell her coconut sunscreen and said 4 words that rearranged my entire nervous system. We're sharing one room. My name is Dean Foster. I was 30 years old, a high school physics teacher from Ann Arbor, and at that exact moment I was doing complicated math in my head that had nothing to do with velocity or mass. The math went something like 12 years of friendship, 1 queen bed, and 0 plans for how to survive either. Say that again, I said. You heard me. Sadie hitched her tote bag higher on her shoulder and started up the porch steps like she hadn't just detonated a small bomb in the middle of my chest. My aunt double-booked the guest rooms. Something about a spreadsheet error. Every room's got somebody in it except the one at the end of the hall. 1 bed. Queen. I already checked. And you're telling me this now. In the driveway. Like it's a scheduling note. Would you have preferred I text you from the car? She turned, sunglasses pushed up into her dark hair, and gave me the look she'd been giving me since we were 19 years old, and she talked me into skipping a physics midterm to drive 4 hours to a concert neither of us could really afford. The look that said she already knew she'd win. She just wanted to watch me pretend to argue first. I would have preferred a warning. Something with lead time. You've had 3 days of lead time. You just spent it worrying about the wrong part. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent 3 days rehearsing how to hold her hand convincingly in front of relatives who'd never met me. How to remember the fake anniversary date she'd texted me. March, she said, easy to remember. We can say it was a slow start. And I had spent exactly 0 seconds preparing for the actual bed part of the plan. Here is the backstory, because you'll need it to understand why I said yes in the first place. Sadie Callahan and I met in a college dorm hallway when she knocked on my door at 11 at night to ask if I had a fire extinguisher because her roommate had, in her words, aggressively misunderstood ramen. I did not have a fire extinguisher. I did have a working smoke alarm and reasonably good judgment, so I helped her drag a smoking pot into the hallway shower instead. We'd been inseparable ever since. 12 years. 2 apartments each. 1 brief, forgettable relationship on my end that she'd politely never liked, and 1 2-year relationship on hers that had ended 8 months ago when her boyfriend Marcus decided monogamy was more of a suggestion than a rule. I had never told her I was in love with her. That fact lived in a locked drawer somewhere behind my ribs, filed under things that would ruin a good thing if I ever opened it. I told myself the friendship was worth more than the risk. I told myself that every year, usually right around her birthday, when she'd fall asleep on my couch during a movie and I'd sit there memorizing the way her breathing changed, hating myself a little for noticing. The wedding was her cousin Priya's. The family was enormous, warm, and relentlessly nosy. The kind of family where somebody's grandmother would ask about your love life before she asked your name. Sadie's mother, in particular, had spent the last 2 years quietly campaigning for Sadie to get back together with a guy from high school named Trevor who now sold boats in Traverse City and who Sadie described, generously, as fine, if you enjoy conversations that only ever go one direction. I can't show up single again, Sadie had said over the pad thai. My mom's going to have Trevor seated next to me at the reception. She's already texted me his dietary restrictions. I need a boyfriend, Dean. A believable one. Someone who already knows how I take my coffee and won't propose by the end of the weekend. So basically me. Basically you. I said yes because I am, apparently, a man with very few functioning defenses when it comes to Sadie Callahan asking me for something. I did not say yes because I thought it would be easy. I said yes because some small, reckless part of me thought that 4 days of pretending might feel almost as good as the real thing, and I was hungry enough for almost that I didn't stop to consider the cost. The room, when we got up there, was worse than advertised, meaning it was better than advertised, meaning it was exactly the kind of room you'd put 2 people in if you wanted them to fall in love against their will. Sloped ceiling, A window that looked out over the actual lake, a reading chair in the corner nobody would ever sit in, and one bed. Queen-sized, white quilt, entirely too small for two adults who were performing a relationship and desperately trying not to feel one. "I'll take the floor," I said. "You will not take the floor. This floor has personally injured 3 of my cousins at various family gatherings. It's basically plywood with a rug's promise. I've slept on worse." "You've slept on a memory foam mattress since 2019. Dean, don't lie to me in my own family's house." I laughed despite myself, because that was the other thing about Sadie. She never let a moment get too heavy before she'd found the exact right joke to lighten it. The kind of joke that only landed because she knew you well enough to know where your bruises were and carefully avoided them. "Fine," I said. "We share. Pillow wall. Strict borders. I'll bring my physics teacher energy and enforce international treaty law if I have to. God help us both." That first night set the tone for the whole weekend. We'd spend the day performing, her hand tucked into mine at the rehearsal dinner, my arms slung casually over the back of her chair while her aunts asked pointed questions about our 5-month anniversary, the two of us trading private smiles across crowded rooms that felt a little too real to be acting. And then we'd come back to that room and lie 2 feet apart in the dark, both of us pretending to already be asleep. "You're good at this," she whispered on night 2, into the dark between us. "Good at what?" "Pretending to be my boyfriend. You held my hand like you meant it at dinner." My heart did something complicated. "Method acting," I said. "I read an article." "Liar. I am an excellent liar. It's the physics teacher in me. I make things sound true even when they're theoretical." She was quiet for a second. Was any of it theoretical? I did not have a good answer for that, so I said nothing, and she let the silence stand, and neither of us slept particularly well. Day 2 brought the family softball game, a Callahan tradition older than most of the cousins currently arguing about batting order, and it was there that I first understood exactly how much trouble I was in. Sadie played shortstop, like she had something to prove to a stadium full of people who weren't watching, diving for a grounder in a sundress with the kind of reckless commitment that made her Uncle Pete yell, "That's my girl," from the lawn chairs. I struck out twice trying to look casual about it and struck gold on the 3rd pitch, which sent Sadie sprinting home from second base, hair flying loose from its ponytail, laughing so hard she nearly missed the plate. She barreled into me afterward, arms around my neck, still catching her breath. "You actually hit one," she said. I'm genuinely stunned. Low expectations. My favorite kind to exceed. "Kiss me, we're celebrating." She said it fast, casual, the way she'd said everything all weekend, like it cost her nothing. But her eyes flicked toward her mother in the lawn chairs, checking the audience, and I understood we were still performing, even here, even now, with grass stains on both our knees and her heart hammering against my chest from the run. I kissed her anyway. Quick, easy, exactly the kind of kiss a real boyfriend gives a girlfriend who just scored the winning run. It should have meant nothing. It meant everything, and I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to talk myself out of noticing that. That evening, while everyone else napped off the sun, Sadie and I took the canoe out onto the lake, ostensibly to scout good photo spots for the wedding day, and actually, I think, because both of us needed an hour without an audience. "Can I tell you something weird?" she asked, trailing her fingers through the water while I paddled. "You've never needed permission before. I like this. The pretending part. I don't know what that says about me." She wasn't looking at me when she said it, watching the ripples spread out behind her hand instead. It's terrifying how easy it is. Maybe it's easy because we've had 12 years of practice being comfortable with each other. Maybe. She still wasn't looking at me. Or maybe I've just been waiting for an excuse. I didn't have a response ready for that, and the moment slid past us the way the shoreline did, close enough to reach and gone before I could decide whether reaching was allowed. We paddled back as the sky went orange over the water, and neither of us mentioned it again, though I caught her watching me twice on the walk back to the house, like she was deciding something and hadn't landed on an answer yet. Day 3 was the wedding itself. Priya looked radiant in ivory lace under a tent strung with string lights, and the whole family cried through the vows in the specific, unashamed way that big, loud families do. Sadie cried too, quietly, and I handed her a napkin without being asked, and her mother watched the whole exchange from 3 seats away with an expression that made my stomach drop, because it looked less like suspicion and more like hope. Trevor showed up to the reception anyway, dietary restrictions and all, and made a valiant attempt to reclaim territory by asking Sadie to dance during the open floor set. She deflected it gracefully, the way she deflected everything, with a joke and a redirect, and ended up back at our table with her shoes off under it, her foot resting against my ankle like it belonged there. "You okay?" I asked. "I'm great. I just watched a man named Trevor describe a pontoon boat for 4 straight minutes like it was a personality. Some men peek at pontoon boats. Don't be smug. You peeked at a fire extinguisher joke 12 years ago, and you're still riding that. I'm allowed one bit." She laughed, and then her mother appeared at the edge of the table with 2 glasses of champagne and the specific brightness of a woman circling a topic. "You two are just adorable," she said. "I have to say, Sadie, I was worried after Marcus. But this," she gestured between us like she was blessing a crop, "this feels different. This feels real." Sadie's hand found mine under the table and squeezed. Hard. A silent apology or a silent plea. I couldn't tell which. "It is different, Mom," she said, and her voice cracked on the word different in a way that made my chest ache, because I couldn't tell if that crack was performance or truth, and I desperately wanted it to be truth. That night, back in the room, the pretending finally ran out of road. Sadie sat on the edge of the bed still in her bridesmaid dress, one strap slipping off her shoulder, mascara smudged just slightly at the corner of one eye. She looked tired in the specific way you look tired after holding your whole face together in public for 6 straight hours. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Always. When my mom said that thing. About it feeling real. She twisted the hem of her dress between her fingers. "Why did you look like that?" "Like what?" "Like it hurt." I sat down beside her, close enough that our shoulders almost touched, not quite. The lake was dark outside the window, and somewhere far off a loon called once and went silent. "Because it did," I said. "Because I've spent this whole weekend holding your hand and calling you my girlfriend to strangers, and every single time it felt like practice for something I actually want and I don't get to have." Sadie went very still. "I should have told you before we did this," I said, because once the first honest sentence was out, the rest came easier, like a dam that had finally cracked. "I should have said no to the fake part and asked you something real instead. I've been in love with you for years, Sadie. Quietly. Badly. I've been in love with you since before Marcus, through Marcus, after Marcus, and I said yes to this whole ridiculous plan because some stupid, hopeful part of me wanted 4 days of pretending, even knowing it would end." She didn't say anything for a long moment, and I braced myself for the sound of something breaking, 12 years of friendship folding in on itself, because I'd finally opened the locked drawer at the worst possible time. Then she said, very quietly, "You held my hand like you meant it." "I did mean it." "I know. I could tell. That's what scared me." Her eyes lifted to mine, bright and unguarded in a way I'd almost never seen. "I've spent this whole weekend terrified that I was imagining it, that I wanted it to be real so badly. I was reading meaning into a guy who was just being a good friend and a better actor than I gave him credit for." "You wanted it to be real?" "Dean." She let out a shaky laugh. "I asked you to be my fake boyfriend because I couldn't handle asking you to be my real one and hearing you say no. I've been in love with you since the fire extinguisher, if you want the honest timeline. I just got very good at filing it under friendship because the friendship was the part one couldn't survive losing." The room went quiet the way rooms do right before everything changes. "So we've been in love with each other for over a decade," I said, and it took a spreadsheet error and one bed to say it out loud. Efficient, really, if you think about it. I reached over and tucked the strap of her dress back onto her shoulder, my hand lingering at her collarbone longer than the task required. "Can I kiss you?" I asked. For real this time. Not for an audience. "You'd better." I kissed her like every unsaid thing from the last 12 years had finally found a door out. She made a soft sound against my mouth and curled her fingers into the front of my shirt, pulling me closer, and I felt the specific, terrifying relief of finally putting down something I'd been carrying for a very long time. When we broke apart, her forehead rested against mine, both of us breathing like we'd run somewhere. "For the record," she whispered, "this bed only has one side now. I'm revoking the pillow wall treaty. Effective immediately? Effective the second you kissed me." We didn't sleep much that night, not for scandalous reasons, mostly because we spent hours doing what we should have done years earlier, just talking, mapping out a decade of almost we'd both been too careful to name. She told me she'd noticed my hands first, back in that dorm hallway, steady while everyone else panicked about the ramen fire. I told her I'd noticed the particular, unshakable way she laughed with her whole chest, like joy was something worth taking up space with. We fell asleep somewhere around 4 in the morning, tangled together in a bed that had stopped being a problem to solve and started being exactly where we belonged. Morning came with sunlight through the sloped window, and Sadie's mother knocking gently on the door to ask if we wanted breakfast before everyone left. Sadie answered it in my flannel shirt, hair a wreck, looking entirely unbothered, and her mother took one look at the two of us and smiled like she'd known the truth long before we said a word out loud. "I knew it," she said. "Trevor never stood a chance." "Mom, I'm just saying. That boy talks about pontoons like they've done something for the world." We laughed the whole drive home, 6 hours of Michigan highway that felt shorter than it had any right to, her hand resting on my knee the entire way, no performance required. 6 months later, I moved my drafting of lesson plans and my entire life 2 blocks over into Sadie's apartment, mostly because neither of us could stand the commute between loving someone and going home to an empty place. She still falls asleep during movies, except now it's on my shoulder instead of my couch, and I still sit there memorizing the sound of her breathing, except now I don't have to hate myself for it. We went back to that lake house for Priya's first anniversary party, and when the innkeeper, Sadie's uncle, technically, who ran the place as a side business, asked if we wanted the same room, Sadie looked at me across the porch and said, "Only if it's still got one bed." It did. We didn't build a pillow wall. We didn't need one. Sometimes I think about that Tuesday over cold pad thai, about how close I came to saying no, or worse, saying yes and never telling her the truth, letting 4 days of pretending stay exactly that. I think about how one accidental scheduling error, one queen bed, and one very brave, very tired confession in the dark rearranged the entire shape of my life. Sadie says she believes in spreadsheet errors now, the way some people believe in signs. I believe in her. Same thing, really, just with better handwriting. Would you have said yes if your best friend asked you to be their fake boyfriend or girlfriend for a weekend? What would you have done if you found out you were sharing one bed? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. If you like this one, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.